Andrew Cuomo planning his escape from New York if his socialist opponent Zohran Mamdani becomes mayor.
Cuomo insisting he's still in the race, saying, quote, "It's all or nothing. We either win or even I will move to Florida, God forbid."
Vivek Ramaswamy is running as Republican for governor of Ohio, and he joins us now. So great to see you. So, there is something to be said about the way Zohran Mamdani has actually talked about important issues. And they're issues that you have always been very vocal about talking about, particularly to young people. How do Republicans salvage these young voters?
Look, I think it's a great question. And the fact of the matter is, in the Biden years, at least, that was when it was last surveyed, Gen Z had more favorable attitudes to socialism than capitalism, which to me spells the right answer. You can bash Mamdani or the other side all we want. What we're missing is making a positive case for capitalism itself. And if we're being honest, that's something that even the GOP at times has now in recent years gone soft on. I think we got to explain to the people, especially young people, why capitalism is the best system known to the history of man to lift people up from poverty. Think about Andrew Cuomo telling New Yorkers you're just going to flee for Florida is not the solution of a leader. Step up and actually offer actual solutions to things like the affordable housing crisis in New York City, which is a major issue across the country. You want to bring down the cost of housing? Start with bringing down property tax rates. Follow through with constructing more housing. Get the red tape stopping the construction of housing out of the way. Those are things a state government, and in New York City's case, even a city's government can do. That's what we're going to be doing in the state of Ohio. And I hope that in the Midwest, in the heart of the country, the state where I was born and raised, we're able to provide those positive alternatives, because I think in the long run, that's what's going to be required for conservatives and Republicans to make our case, rather than just really in a soft, superficial way, just bashing the other side. That's what's missing, and I hope that's what we're able to bring. I'm going to do my part in my home state.
You know, I couldn't agree more. I do think we need to make a better case for capitalism. I think also, Vivek, you and I both probably agree that our schools have been indoctrinating our kids, especially here in New York City. You can imagine what kind of messages they're getting about socialism versus capitalism. But to your point, capitalism that is not sort of grounded or parallel with morality doesn't work. You just get greed. And I think that that young people are really smart, and they're seeing that they're seeing these things fall apart. And one of the things I liked about your message when you were running for president, and I'm sure you're giving this message as you're running for governor, is you talked a lot about religion, morality, the role of the family in sort of creating a society that's ethical enough to handle something as wonderful and free as capitalism.
And these are the conversations we ought to be having, because I often say this, Rachel, is virtue is a precondition for capitalism to work. If our wants match our needs, then capitalism is the best system that you could imagine. But when your wants diverge from your needs, think about the modern internet, think about modern marketing online, that's what drives at those wedges. And so these are the more nuanced conversations that I want to see us have on the right. That starts with the family. That starts with basic education. But if young people are cultivated to fill that vacuum of purpose and meaning with the real thing, faith, family, patriotism, hard work, that then creates the conditions for a generation of citizens who are so inculcated with the right values and virtue that then capitalism works to be able to actually lift people up. And instead of then bashing billionaires, the real question is, how can we ensure that all young people are able to enjoy the most important things that billionaires do? Access to a world-class education, access to a system that actually allows them to build a family and a home they own. Those are the positive solutions in the direction we need to be talking about.
Hey, Vivek, I got to ask you about this. A PAC supporting your gubernatorial run has bought digital billboards in Times Square, telling New Yorkers worried about Zohran, Ohio is waiting for you. You can see him here. It's a pretty clear picture, Vivek, of, which choice voters might want to make, but you're trying to pull New Yorkers to Ohio.
Certainly the right ones who want to embrace that American spirit of positive ambition. I want to create an Ohio that is a home for them. And it's somewhat personal to me, actually, because I was born and raised in Ohio, lived there all the way through high school, But then after I went to college on the East Coast, I actually started my first business in New York City. It was the seat of positive ambition in the country. Sadly, that New York City doesn't really exist anymore. You go through the de Blasio years. In some sense, Mamdani would just top it off. And what I want to take is that seed of ambition, that positive sense of competition, creation, and to bring that in a positive way to the heart of the country in Ohio. We're going to become a zero-income tax state. We're going to cap property taxes. Zero-income tax includes zero capital gains tax. At the same time, we're going to reform not just school choice, which I believe in, but also actually improve the quality of the public schools by bringing some level of performance management, making sure the best teachers are able to be compensated more than the starting salary of $40,000 a year in public schools. And I think those are the kinds of solutions that I hope makes Ohio not just one of the best states in the Midwest, but the top state in the country to raise a young family, to be able to give our kids that world-class education that I believe is the birthright of every American. That's the kind of positive vision that I hope helps lift up Ohio, but I hope also serves as a model for the rest of the country, not just Texas or Florida. And so I do hope that those who share those values at least come on over to Ohio, and when I'm in charge, hopefully in a couple of years, we're going to be able to lead our state back to
You're going to be
greatness.
competing with the sunshine in Florida, but let's see how many takers we have in Times Square. I actually see a lot of people from Ohio in Times Square. They're visiting, but they're probably happy to return back to Ohio.
Well, nobody brings that message better than you, and so
That's
we
true.
are
Thank you,
grateful
Vivek.
to you for that and for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Vivek.
Thank you, guys.
You got it.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.